Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to week 3 here at Two Pros and an Average Joe. This is Brady Hanna, and I'm joined by
Jeremy Koling. Right now I'm driving in San Francisco, and we also have
Paul Ulibarri, here in Arizona, just chilling, ready to get this podcast going, and I'm excited.
All right. So I want to start this off the same way we did last week, hearing a little bit about, what you guys did this week, how you're preparing for the tour, and Jerem, how you're preparing for the major coming up.
Yeah. Well, so I'm actually flying out of San Francisco tomorrow, and I'm heading straight to Perth. It's going to be like a 28-hour flight, so it's going to be super fun. And just this week, basically, what I've done is I had a nice little session with a sports massage therapist. Got a deep tissue massage to try to relieve some of the tension in my sciatica, and I also got to I've been on vacation this week, so I got to visit Yosemite National Park and got to do some really fun things in San Francisco that I've never done before. And so it was kind of a mental cleansing for me. I've spent so much time playing disc golf and practicing, and it's nice to every once in a while take some time off and just enjoy the off season, which is kind of strange that this major is happening right now in the middle of what we typically use as our off season / recoup time. But got to play one round this week. Last night or yesterday, we went out to Golden Gate Park and just randomly got out there as they were flipping for doubles, and ended up getting Cali at a course I'd never played before. So it was pretty fun to play doubles with a group of guys that were really excited that I came out there. And so we had a lot of fun, and we went out for drinks and food afterwards. And so the putt felt really great, though. I probably made 5 or 6 putts outside 40 feet. So, I mean, putting with these new McPros, and it seems that we're connecting right now. So I'm excited to get down to Australia and really start focusing on my game before the major starts.
All right. Paul, what are you up to? Are you eating Chick-fil-A right now, or what are you doing?
No, not right now. Actually, I just got done. Every Wednesday I play a traditional golf skins match here in Scottsdale. I go to this course, and we play skins, and I play 18 holes of golf. So it's kind of like my hobby now, that I can't play basketball anymore. So I picked up ball golf again, and yeah, I do that every Wednesday. But no, my weeks, pretty much the same as last week. I get up, I go to the gym. After that, been practice putting a lot every day, and that's pretty much it. Nothing crazy. I actually have a tournament this weekend. I didn't get to go to Australia because of the knee issue, and I wasn't feeling comfortable going across the continent to play a tournament. But I am playing a B tier here. I am playing a B tier here in Arizona this weekend, so I have been practicing a little bit for that, and yeah, just practicing my putt and trying to get ready for the next season.
What about you, Brady?
This week, classes started for me at the University of Iowa. It's my last day of school.
What's your first day of school?
It's my first day of school, so this is my last semester. Right. And I graduate, which is exciting.
Boy, that's exciting.
Because it's probably my 19th year of college, which is awesome.
Why don't we get into some hot scores this week? You got something for us, Brady?
Yeah. So every week we're gonna go through and kind of talk about who had the week's hottest round. This was brought to you by our numbers guy, Curtis Manahan, who hopefully will join us here at some point in the coming weeks. But it looks like Johnny McRae had the hottest unofficial round, and that was at the Florida Disc Golf Championships, and he shot a
surprise, really. I'm surprised to see Johnny McRae shoot well in Florida. He typically struggles down there.
And he shot a 50. I don't know what course it was, but it was a 1065 rating. So
that's nothing.
That's
nothing for him.
I think I might have had Last year, probably maybe 3 above 1050 rated rounds or something. Like, I don't think people realize how rare 1060 is. That's a big number to accomplish. Good for him. And did he win the tournament?
I don't shoot the messenger. I didn't really look, so I just got that.
Unofficially, Johnny McRae's 732nd Open win in Florida. So he hasn't lost in Florida in 74 years. So he's got a really good record down there.
Yes,
I'm sure he's loving the sun down there in Florida right now, man. It's so funny, man, when he when it's like 60 degrees outside, you know, what most of us are like, oh, that's a pretty nice day outside. He's wearing sweatpants and sweatshirts, and he is just like, he likes it toasty.
Boy, dude.
Yeah.
Paul will tell you it's cold outside and it's 73.
Yeah, those warm weather folks are kind of pretty annoying.
It did warm up where I was from to 32 degrees. I think we played Westlake again, and we had 14 teams come out this time, which is pretty big for the middle of winter, and ended up winning it, which was cool. So that'll probably be my biggest win of the year.
14 teams. You damn right that's going to be your biggest win of the year. Congratulations, man.
Yeah, I was able to watch. I was able to watch my partner shoot a pretty great round, so that was neat to see close up.
Well, let's
the life of an average Joe. You know, that's great.
Exactly.
I think we should give people. What's that?
You got to pick a good partner and just ride it home.
Sure. Well, this week, we have a special guest this week. That's right, Brady, right?
So last week we talked about, you know, our thoughts on the disciplinary process, and the chair of the PDGA disciplinary committee board, I don't know what they call it, reached out to me. His name's Robert Leonard. I think he's from North Carolina.
Yeah, he's the North Carolina director. He's the guy that if you want to run events in North Carolina, he's the guy to go to. He's been a guy that's been around since I started playing disc golf, and he's an interesting character. He's got a lot to say, and I think that he'll be able to provide some pretty interesting feedback into what the disciplinary process is. And it'll be interesting to pick his brain and just see what he has to say about the whole the appeals process and just what they have to do to decide how to punish a player when they step out of line.
Yep. So, Chase, do you want to patch him in? I think he's waiting for us.
And so Robert Leonard. Speaking of hot rated rounds, I one of the second tournament I ever played, Robert Leonard, who we call him MTL in North Carolina, which is short for Mount Leonard, and he at one of the first tournaments I ever went to, he shot a 38 on this course on Wellspring Shorts, and I was a beginning amateur player, and I remember that this guy shot a 38. It was the first round of the tournament, and it was something like a 1080 or 1070 something rated round.
Man, what
and it was like I thought this guy was going to be the best disc golfer I'd ever seen, and it ended up just being Robert Leonard. But,
the greatest highlight of.
Is that you, Robert? You here?
Yeah, that was quite the introduction.
Oh yeah, there he is.
Thank you for that, and I apologize that I let you down.
Oh yeah, you did let me down. Because what did you end up finishing at that event?
Well, what I like to say, that first round was rated 1074. My last round was rated 1,005, and I still averaged under 1,000 for the tournament.
Oh man,
I love stories like that. That's amazing, Robert.
I mean, I think I shot like 920 the second round and was still on the lead card, and then it was a weird weekend.
I just remember all I knew was that first round, that was all the buzz that was going around in the tournament. And obviously I wasn't playing open, so I really wasn't paying attention to what was going on. And I just assumed that if you shot a 38 first round, you're going to win the tournament. And then at the award ceremony, like eighth place, Robert Leonard. I'm like, what?
That was right when I was like your kind of your traditional or your stereotypical up and coming open player where you literally never knew what I was going to shoot.
Yeah. North Carolina's got a ton of those guys, a lot of talent, and then just I don't know, maybe there's just something that separates the consistent players at the top, and then the rest of the guys who are your 975 to 990 range that have the potential to shoot a super hot round, but then I don't know, just can't finish 4 rounds.
Hey, Jerm, quick question: have you ever shot the trifecta, which could be two different ways: 800 rated, 900 rated, 1,000 rated, or 900 rated, 1,000 rated, and 1,100 rated?
I've only shot
same
one
tournament.
I've only shot one official 1,100 rated round, and that was a weekly event, so that was just a 1-round thing. And
so it doesn't count. Gotcha.
Yeah, well, it certainly counted on my rate, so whatever. But no, I've never shot an 800 rated round before, so.
I know of
really?
2 people who have shot in the same tournament: a 700 rated round, an 800 rated round, a 900 rated round, and a 1,000 rated round.
I know Henry Childress has done that.
Henry Childress has done it, and Forrest Calloway from Georgia has done that.
Yep,
I've never heard of it. That's crazy.
That's got to be a very, very limited group to be in.
It's the only 2 people. That's the only 2 I've ever heard of.
Yeah, quadfecta that's really. I mean, trifecta is pretty good, but quadfecta is that's something else.
I've definitely done the trifecta: 800, 900, and 1,000, but I've never dipped in the 700s. I don't think, and I hope I never do.
I thought that it was pretty cool that I had never shot in the 800s before, and I think I had mentioned it to Ken Climo at some point, and I was like, "Have you ever shot in the 900s?" And he looked at me and just laughed and is like, how he has that little arrogant huh, you kidding me, kid? He's like, "I've never shot below 950." Oh, Climo. Anyways, well, Robert, we brought you on the show today because we want to ask you some questions that I'm sure a lot of people are dying to hear about, and I guess one of them would start off with explaining the disciplinary process. And when you talk about that, if you can go into the appeals process in the same time.
Yeah. So, first of all, I think it's important to kind of quantify my role and not that I just so everyone really understands my involvement. So I started on the discipline committee in 2006. I was reached out to. I had filed a complaint regarding an issue, and no one ever followed up with it, and it really upset me. And they basically offered me to be on the committee because I was just basically, I had said to them, like, guys, like, this is ridiculous. Like how have I never heard anything? I want to be on this committee to figure out why. So that was 2006, and then when Sean Sinclair was the head of the committee forever. The chair is the actual term. And then as he transitioned to the board of directors, they were looking for a committee replacement, and they eventually asked me to do it as the chair of the committee. So so that's kind of my history on there. And but basically the way the whole process works is.
Can I interrupt you?
Absolutely.
How many committee members are there? And is, like you said, you mentioned they just kind of added you. Could you, before you explain everything, how many committee members are there, and how did everyone become a committee member?
Yeah, including myself, there are 8, which is a full committee. Obviously, this past 6 months, we've had a lot of notoriety or infamy or whatever term you want to use. So we've had a lot of people reach out to us about joining, but we are considered full right now with 8. So basically, the way that someone is granted onto the committee is we either, for lack of a better term, will recruit someone, or sometimes we will. In the past, we've just kind of posted, almost kind of application style. We just post on the website, "Hey, we're looking for somebody to add to this committee." I, as the chair, I've never had to. We recently did add somebody just because of the caseload. We went from 7 to 8, and we did add somebody So in that situation, I made a recommendation, and that person was interested, and the board of directors then verifies that person. But that's how that process works.
In question on that, how do you discipline somebody on the disciplinary committee? Are they immune to everything?
No, absolutely not. No, I've been involved. No one's ever reported me for discipline, but I've been involved as a tournament director. Do what now?
First time for everything.
Yeah, you never know. I've been involved as a tournament director where I've had to submit discipline cases. I've been involved as just a player at the event where something happened. I'm the state coordinator in North Carolina, so a lot of times some random event will happen, and the TD will call me Saturday night and say, "Hey, I don't really know what to do about this. Kind of give me your advice." So, in those situations, and those things are going to happen, but what we do in those situations is we just recluse ourselves from the argument or not from the argument, that's the wrong word, from the discussion. We just basically will appoint somebody. In my situation as a chair, I just appoint someone to handle the case, but it's very common for someone to say, I'm not even going to vote in this case because of, this or this. So those things are pretty common. Right. And that's just the nature of the beast of our sport. Our sport is everywhere we turn, there's conflicts of interest. And that's just really because of the small size of the sport. And that's just the way it is.
I got a quick question.
Sure.
So just to kind of give everybody an idea, how many cases do you guys get, like, let's say per weekend or even per month? Is there a overwhelming amount of these cases, or for the most part is it pretty low key?
Well, it really would depend on what you'd quantify as a case. The reason why I say that is if there's any reason someone is disqualified from a PDGA event, where the tournament director is actually listed on the TD report, this person was removed or disqualified, or whatever verb you want to use, that TD report gets sent to me to review. And then there's also players can also email the committee directly. Players can fill out a form. So any of these three ways trigger that process starting. And then the first thing that I do in that process is to determine, what is worthy to investigate and bring to the committee. So, when you look at it like that, I would say it's not uncommon for me to get probably, I'd say 2 to 5 a month. Obviously, this time of year, there's not nearly as many just because there's not the number of events. But, it's probably 2 to 5 a month this time of year. And once you get into the hardcore part of the season, it's probably 5 to 7 a month.
Right. And for the most part, I'm guessing that when you get a case where somebody was disqualified, it's probably pretty cut and dry that he was deserving of the disqualification, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, and a lot of times is, for example, like, I'm a huge sports fan, as I know both you guys are. I use a lot of sports analogies. If a guy gets 2 technical fouls in a basketball game, he gets kicked out of the game. Sometimes that's enough penalty. Sometimes that's enough to say, you know what, Paul over here, I used a random name and I picked yours, but John over here is, John over here got out of line. He was disqualified from the game, but that's all that we need to worry about. Sometimes you get, you get the Palace, the fight that happened in Detroit where you got, Ron Artest punching people. That guy's obviously getting kicked out of the game, but then there's going to be more discipline needed. Right. So a lot of the times, the tournament director, a lot of times it's just something like, John and Paul. God, I used Paul again. This is not intentional, I promise. John and Bob got in a big argument, and John cussed out Bob, and John was DQ'd from the tournament. And a lot of times it's like, okay, well, that's plenty enough discipline. The guy was disqualified and forfeited his entry fee and all of that. It's when things go to different levels or have higher levels of significance or things like that, and if there's anything, I don't want to sound like that I'm just, picking and choosing things, if I think there's any, a lot of times I open the case up, and then the committee, we as the committee decide that there's no punishment needed.
Right.
So if there's any kind of situation where I'm like, this is a maybe, then we obviously investigate it.
So how do you decide that? Like, what happens when an issue is brought up?
Should we let him?
What factors are brought in, and how do you decide what the punishment should be?
Well, the answer to both those questions is something that you guys talked about on the last podcast, in terms of like there is a matrix, there is a set standard of, if you do this and you're found guilty of that, for lack of a better term, this is what's going to happen. And then that if you do that on the second time around, this is what's going to happen. If you do it on the third time, so on and so forth. So we have this long list of things that we do. So, anytime I see one of those actions, that's kind of trigger that. And in fact, for example, I'll just, one is probably drinking in a PDGA event. That's pretty much an automatic 6-month probation if you are found guilty of that. So for example, a lot of times our polls will say, John was observed drinking, Adam, Sarah, and Bob all agreed that this occurred. John did not diffuse it. Do we agree that this should be the standard 6-month probationary period? So that would be just kind of an example of how one of our polls go.
That's a pretty cut and dry situation where that's a pretty clear. I mean, that one, I feel like most people understand the 6-month ban for a situation like that.
Even the cut and dry drinking offense, that's not public, is it?
No, that's, and there's a lot of things within the discipline committee that I agree should not be public.
Right.
I personally disagree that the matrix should not be public. The PDGA stance on that is that it shouldn't be public. I personally do not agree with that. That's one of those kind of over my head situations. But that's probably one of the big misconceptions about is that I'll just we all know the elephant in the room is the Brad Williams situation, and I know you guys are taking the approach of like this is our jobs, this is our livelihoods, and I respect both of you, and I respect both of you as players and people, so that's why I even agreed to come on and do this. But it's there is a and everything like that. It's not just throwing a dartboard and cool, we landed on this number. That's not at all how it works.
Right, that was going to be my next question. If it was public, and obviously you explained that it is not public, the matrix system and stuff like that. And is that something that can change? I mean, what's the process with that? Is that something that maybe Jerm and I and some players can come together as a group and be like, hey, like we feel this and we feel strongly about it. Can we change this to where we kind of have an idea?
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you're dealing with something like this, that there's always, two sides of the coin. The main overall reason that the PDGA, and this is one of the things that I 100% agree with, the main overall reason the PDGA is so cryptic about a lot of this discipline stuff is advice of their attorney. If you go and apply for a job, and a lot of companies will want to get a reference when they are trying to hire you. And a lot of companies will call your former employer, and many former employers will not provide a reference for anybody because they are afraid of that company using any information against that person, and then that person then suing their former employer. So there's a lot of that same concern with the PDGA. For example, if someone is caught using illegal drugs, the PDGA doesn't want an employer to Google someone's name and then all of a sudden, like, oh, wow, they were suspended 6 years ago for smoking dope at a PDGA event. What is that about? And the PDGA is very.
You think?
Do what now?
If they did that, I mean, that's public cut and dry stuff. Like every other league is going to release that kind of thing happened. I just, that's I think what they're coming from is I understand the ones where you have to investigate and form opinions and stuff, but cut and dry things and agreed upon things, don't you think those should at least be made public, even regarding situations with players? Like, oh, it was a level 2 offense. He was smoking dope on the course. It doesn't sound like something that's debatable.
Well, and this is kind of where this admittedly discussion gets a little muddy, because, what I personally believe and what I personally agree with, this is the PDGA is going to always follow the advice of the attorney. And this is what the PDGA attorney has recommended not to do, and what to say and what not to say and why. I'm kind of 50-50 personally on it. I see a lot of reasons why it should be public, and I see a lot of reasons why it shouldn't be public. But regardless, that is the PDGA following the advice of their attorney. And
that's public information. You're talking about releasing public information. We're talking about getting some sort of matrix public.
That should absolutely. I absolutely 100% agree that the discipline matrix should be public.
I mean, that to me seems like we can. I understand that they're trying to protect their players and their organization that way, but that's a completely different issue, I believe.
Don't you think
that's not exactly what I was getting at? I think I was misunderstood when I asked that question. I was more asking about the offenses, not necessarily Joe who did it. I'm saying like level 2, level 1, this is what you do, and this is what's considered level 1, level 2, level 3. I completely understand why the PDGA wouldn't release the public stuff of, say, Joe who actually did that stuff. My concern is I don't know what dictates a level 1 or level 2 offense.
Sure, and like I said, Robert Leonard number 2167776 over here, their player, completely agrees with you. And it's just, I hate to kind of like, I don't want to sound like I'm dodging the question, but that stuff is just completely over my head, and there's nothing that I can do about that. I completely agree that matrix should be public. The other side of that is, there's nothing within that matrix. These are only penalties, for disobeying or not following rules. And the rules that are followed, we always make sure that we quote the rule that the player has broken that has caused the process. So, there is that other side of that. Now 99 times out of 100, if you take away alcohol and drug use, and 99% of it comes from competition manual 3.3, which is essentially player conduct and player misconduct, and that there are segments in there that basically says the PDGA has the right to determine any conduct as detrimental or any conduct as misconduct, and that every action that happens is subject to discipline or committee review. So
now, like you mentioned, sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
But like you said, you released what rule was broken. Can't you tie what rule was broken with punishments? And
we don't release that. What I'm saying is right. that we quote that to the player when we're doing the process. Instead
of giving specifics of what the player did, why don't you just this player broke this rule, it was this level of offense, and now they're on this long of probation, and if they do something during that time frame, they're gonna do this. You think that kind of could be legal? Or
at one point they did do that. Yeah, they absolutely used to do that. If the list of players who are currently the terminology is not in good standing. A player who is not in good standing with the PDGA is defined as a player who is on probation or suspension. That list is always publicly available. I actually looked at it right before we got on just to see if it was still there, and sure enough, it was updated yesterday.
Right. I've seen that same sheet. I've actually looked at that in the past couple of years, so I do know that is public.
Yes, and in the past there was also a column on that included what the person was suspended or on probation for.
Okay.
And that's been removed?
That has been removed to the attorney's recommendation. That it didn't go into any kind of details. It would say player misconduct or substance abuse or illegal drug use or something like that. And then they started thinking about it, and then the attorney said, hey, that's we don't want you releasing details of information, and this is really the same thing. So that section was removed.
That's it. That's interesting because when you talk about that stuff, I think about what would happen if, let's say, something happened to me and I broke a rule. But let's say somebody was saying that I broke a rule and I didn't feel the same way, and I brought my own lawyer into it because I feel like that would be the right process because it's my job and something like that. I'm trying to kind of gather my thoughts here, but has that happened? Has lawyers been involved from player to the PDGA?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. It's usually in the appeal process that, someone will have an attorney review everything and everything like that. But I don't think anything's ever gone to court that I'm aware of or anything crazy like that. Usually, I don't want people to think that, and I know you guys don't think this, that it's a witch hunt or that, if, someone just says something and there's no way that someone's ever going to be found innocent, so to speak. I always bring this example up because it's a really good example of someone being found innocent. It's a well-known player, and I have his permission to speak about it because it was a good example. So about a year and a half ago, someone reported Will Schustrick for a violation of the tour vending policy. To basically oversimplify that, if a company gives, I'll just bring up Discraft. If Discraft gives an event $10,000 and part of that event rules is that they get to exclusive right to vend, if that's a big deal, and that's very important to protect those sponsors' interests to continue sponsorship within the sport. So that's why that tour vending policy is there. So there was an event where the event had a signed agreement with a vendor, and they look over and they see a bunch of people over at Will's car going through discs, and they go over and tell him like, "Hey, dude, like we got a vending policy, you can't sell." And he says, I'm not. Prodigy had just signed their new street team, their protege team. I'm not sure of the term. And he was just like, these are just some new players that are just looking through some discs. Well, apparently they didn't really believe him, and they reported it. And it turned out that was exactly the case, that it was just people happening to be looking through his disc that he just had that he was trying to give to them. So that was an example of a misunderstanding, and everything kind of worked itself out. There are those situations. It's not like I think especially with the Brad Williams situation, there was a lot of things that were said that may or may not have happened, and a lot of stuff kind of got blown out of proportion. And it's not like that we were just it's not a witch hunt. Many people are found innocent or basically not enough evidence to prove that they did what they were accused of.
Right, and because it was just such a high-profile player, people form their own opinions and stuff and things like that.
Correct.
Do you feel that the disciplinary committee, when dealing with the card-carrying tour members, could be assisted by a small group of card-carrying tour players as well as a system, to deal with the higher-profile things, maybe in regards to punishment or rehab of an image? Do you feel any assistance or perspective from touring pros like Paul and Germ or something, people with good ethics and a proven track record of rule compliance? Do you think that could assist in the future? That's what I've been kicking around all week, kind of.
Yeah, yes and no. I like the idea to a degree of a touring player on the committee.
Not so much on the committee, just to help out in touring card situations. And not even with the punishment, maybe just not with deciding right or wrong, maybe with punishment or rehab of image.
Well, if anything, I would if it involved a touring player, the actual last person that I would want on the committee in that situation would be a touring player. And the reason I say that is because, like I said, our sport has tremendous amounts of conflict of interest, and the last thing that we need is a player who was 3 cards away or 2 cards away, or went out to dinner that night and let's just say German Paul are playing, and and Paul gets witnesses an argument between whoever and whoever, and all of a sudden you guys are at dinner and like Paul's like, "Man, you're never going to believe what happened," and all of a sudden Sam over here who's got his tour card is on our committee is like, really, and it just there's too much. It almost be too close, and I think the process is fair for everybody. If for those that are just not involved and not witnessing it and all of that, and and the other thing about that is I like the idea of a touring pro in the committee if they could recluse themselves at the events. If anything happened at the events they had,
maybe you have a pool of 10 people, and you select based on who really is going to be non-biased. Maybe it's not just a set group, rotates in and out, just for fresh perspective. Because I think Paul and Jerm are going to ask you about, changes to the punishment system. Maybe that could help with a change.
And the other side of that is if we're really going to look at statistics and things like that, there's over 35,000 active members in the PDGA. And there's 150 tour card holders. So we're talking less than 0.5% of the PDGA is made up by tour card holders.
Sure, but less of the 0.5% is the most well-known.
It's the most visible, absolutely.
The sport, most visible, and then which I think is really important to hold those people to a certain standard. Just like you see in the NBA or the NFL, they have dress code policy. They have off the court or off the field policies, for behavior and stuff like that. I feel like there should be a certain standard held for those less than 0.5% players who are the most visible.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. And I think, but on the other hand, is when we're investigating situations and whatever, we don't really care who the player is, and I know that sounds kind of bad to say, but what happened to Brad Williams? If that had happened to someone else, the result would have been exactly the same. And I don't know which one of y'all said this on the podcast last time, but you're like, I think it maybe was you, Paul, saying like, I think maybe Brad was kind of the fall boy, or Brad was, the PDJ was trying to make an example, and it really wasn't the case. We were just simply following the discipline matrix that we had laid out.
Well, how many people have had that big of a? How many people have had that big of a suspension?
For I don't want to say the actual violation.
For the same violations. How many?
There have been people who have been suspended for 10 years. But that was basically I'll just say it right now. The worst thing that you can do as a player is compete while suspended. If you get suspended and then compete, that is the absolute worst thing that you can do.
Right.
See, I would think shooting somebody during a tournament would be higher, but
no, it's not as bad. It's not as bad.
That's
come on, guys.
You joke about that, but that person's going to be in prison. The least of that guy's concerns is whether he can play disc golf or not. So we I mean, that's kind of how we think. That's kind of how we look at that. Obviously, I mean, we've never had anybody get shot at a PDGA tournament, thank goodness. But I personally would make sure that would be a lot worse.
Thank you, Robert.
Sign it up
for making sure. Okay, no, back to the topic, because that.
Hey, look, we know you shot somebody. Just make sure you don't play now that you've shot somebody, right?
Yeah.
You play while suspended shooting a guy, you're done.
You're done.
You're done.
Jesus.
I can't go on.
Robert, I got a question for you about. I have a question. What if any changes do you see happening in the near future with the appeals process, or just the disciplinary process in general? Is there anything that you can think of off the top of your head that might be changing, or maybe needs to be addressed, or do you feel like it's a pretty good system, and you feel like the PDGA is pretty well content with it right now?
Well, what's going to be really interesting is whoever gets the executive director position, because that,
Sure.
that's going to really shape and form a lot of this. Brian Graham was a little more on the conservative side with things like that, not as much of a risk taker. And that was obviously, I had a lot of conversation with him during the Brad Williams situation, and that was pretty evident that he was just, more on the conservative side. And I'm not saying that's, right or wrong, just the way it was. So I think it's really hard to kind of predict where everything is going to go until we know who the new executive director is going to be.
Is there anything that you would personally change, or is there anything that you feel like, besides when you mentioned that you would personally like to see that the matrix of disciplinary actions was presented to the public, is there anything else that you can think of that you would think that would benefit the players of the PDGA in the way that the disciplinary process is handled?
I almost think that the PDGA would benefit from not releasing names and not releasing, what people did and everything, but really kind of getting random information out there. Like, hey, if you get suspended, don't play, things like that. I think that's really would benefit a lot of players. But on the other hand, it's like everything is laid out there in the rule book. So like, I'm honestly kind of torn about that. The process is extremely fair. I mean, Jeremy, I know you've known me a long time, and if I don't agree with something, I'm very, very vocal about it.
I think if everyone's ever met you, they know that.
Yeah, but I use that as a point.
Yeah, sure.
Have you ever heard me complaining about the disciplinary process in over 10 years of doing this? No.
Okay, I want to.
So let me ask a question
Sure.
quick. Sorry. Let's say, do you have an option as a disciplinary committee to send someone, say, hey, you're either suspended for 12 months, or you can complete anger management, or hey, this is your third drinking offense, you can either go to AA or you can be suspended for 2 years. Can you make those kind of calls as a disciplinary committee, or is it just suspensions that you can hand out?
See, and that was one of the things that I wanted to debate, Brady. That was really good. You mentioned that it was a good thing that a high-profile player gets treated the same as a non-high-profile player. And I wanted to debate that a little bit for the same reason, Brady, is not only do I disagree with that, and this is the reason why, is because of the example part. I think that Bradley could be used as a good example for good. Okay. So let's say he does what he did, but then you guys say exactly what Brady just said. You did this. Obviously he did those things. He needs to be disciplined, but you make him go to those classes, anger management, whatever it is that he needs help with, because this isn't his first offense, obviously, because of the long suspension. And especially, in my opinion, that should happen because he's a high-profile player. People look up to him, things like that. And that's my debate, is I think, and I feel like I know from other things, other sports, for example, use that same type of discipline.
Yeah, I think it's totally fair. First of all, no, I do not have the ability to recommend any kind of classes or anything like that. Basically, the only thing that I can recommend, and to kind of clarify the process, all my committee does is recommend. It's ultimately the PDJ president, who at this time is Rebecca Duffy, that makes the decision with the assistance of two other board members, who ultimately makes the decision. But all we do is recommend. So I really technically don't have the power to suspend anybody, if you want to get real technical. But no, those recommendations, there's nothing in the PDGA charter that allows for that. There's nothing in the PDGA. But maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's the thing that
if you're recommending, then doesn't it make sense that you guys could recommend some sort of reconciliation option where they provide something back to the community to reduce
absolutely. I think it's a great idea, and there is precedent for that. Probably before the Brad's case, probably the most public notable one was the Cam Todd situation at Brent Hambrick. This predated my time in the committee, so I don't really know what happened. So I'm just speaking hearsay here from what I read on message boards. But apparently he was very upset at the tournament and made some choice remarks at the players' meeting, not the players' meeting, the awards, and he got suspended. And in order to get off his suspension, he had to donate his winnings from USDGC to the Leukemia Foundation, which is what Brad Hammock passed away from. Not Brad Hammock, excuse me, Brent Hambrick. So there is precedent for that, but how it got to that point, I don't know if there was appeals. I have no idea. I wasn't there. But I do know that that the PDGA, if a player, is in that situation and truly needs help, that maybe in the appeal process, the board of directors can do that. I honestly don't know, because it's, that's above me, and we don't deal with it on that level. We have nothing to do with the appeals process. So, maybe that's something that we should look into in terms of that. Maybe that's the answer to the question from earlier about where do we need to go and what do we need to do.
Future.
Do you feel the appeals process should be separated? Because you said you can recommend to the directors, so then they make the decision, and then the appeal goes right back to them, doesn't it? Do you feel there should be any separation or checks and balance there?
There is, because the president is not involved in the appeals process. The president's only involved in the original process.
So the recommendation comes from the board of directors, and then the appeal goes to just the.
Yeah, the flow chart is member or tournament director makes complaint. That is then sent to me. I review it. If I agree that it's the case worth going through, then I go through and investigate everything, and then I present my findings to the committee. We discuss it. When we're done discussing it, we vote, and then I submit to Rebecca Duffy the findings of our investigation as well as our poll results. And then she then goes through and makes the recommendation of the final outcome. And then if the player does choose to appeal, what happens is the board of directors receives that appeal. They contact me. I then forward them the exact information that I send Rebecca. And then I have no idea what happens after that.
Gotcha. I wanted to hit on one more thing, Robert. With what I was talking about before, I was going to say that I think one thing that's important with this whole situation with Bradley is, like we were talking about, high profile. But in his case, I feel like he's kind of stuck with now having that image, and there's no way right now that he can be doing anything to almost doctor that image. Exactly. Doctor his image to where he is now just labeled that right now, and there's nothing that he can do. And that's not good for the game. That's not good for him. That's not good for you guys. That's really not good for anybody. I feel like there has to be something that he can be like, hey, I want to do this to better it and make right for this situation. And I feel like there has to be something in place for both sides for that to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm with you, and
because he has fans. He has fans that look up to him. Kids look up to him. I'm sure players in Texas look up to him and all that stuff. But right now, I feel like he's in a place that's hard for his image, and for him to get back to the same place is going to take I don't even know what it's going to take. That's what
Yeah.
I guess that's my point.
On the other hand, there is, those thoughts and stuff were clearly not in his mind when the alleged incident allegedly occurred. Because that's part of it. I mean, one thing that I really enjoyed about what you guys said last week was like, look, we all have our moments. We all deal with things. I mean, I'm not perfect by any means. I have had situations looking back that I am, personally not proud of. Lines, but I also don't expect, when I do that for someone to if I've had someone come up to me and be like, hey, Robert, I was really looking forward to playing with you, and that was kind of disappointing. I was really disappointed the way that you handled your round, and I said, wow, you're right. I'm sorry, but I wasn't really thinking about that at the time, and maybe I'm kind of dancing around the point. But it's kind of hard to, it's kind of like I'm not in any way, don't interpret this that way. I'm not in any way comparing what Brad allegedly did to anything regarding illegality or something like that serious, but I'm sure when a guy has, been arrested and been in prison for 10 years is trying to look for jobs, I'm sure when he's getting told, no, we won't hire you because of your background, he wasn't thinking about that when he committed the crime. So there's always that end of the sword. And, and the one thing that I will point to that is very public is Brad had a history. This was not Brad's first situation that came to our committee, and I'll definitely confirm that had a major part in the decision.
And shouldn't
Right, but what about the first time? Maybe that's when
Brad was not suspended for his first incident.
No, and that's what I'm saying. Maybe the first incident or the second incident, that's when that needed to be in place. You need to go do this, this, and this. And that I feel like that's where maybe that should be in place is like maybe if you were early on.
Yeah, if you're suggesting some sort of anger management, this is kind of where sometimes where our sport, is so small and is so new. People forget, like, as much as we're growing, we're still very small. And for as long, we just hit the 40th year, that's nothing in the grand scheme of things. So we're still very new. We're still very small. And, this is really the only second time in our history where we've had a high profile player involved in one of these situations, so there isn't really a lot of precedent. And, maybe our committee the next time, or I should hopefully say this will never happen again, but then it's going to happen. The next time there's a high profile player involved, maybe those are things that we need to take into account and learn from that, but, it was really a perfect storm. And there was just so many factors involved in that. And, but under the current rules, our committee has no jurisdiction to offer or suggest anything outside of suspension, probation. That's it.
Right. Brady, do we have any other questions?
No, I was just going to say, I think that is, Robert, thank you so much for coming on and
Yeah,
giving us a lot of great.
Thank you, Robert.
So,
Sure.
We really appreciate you coming on, and we will continue with the few other topics we had, and you have a good rest of the evening, Robert.
Yeah, and just if Jerm didn't mention this, just want to pass on a condolences to the family of Matt Keats, 2009 amateur world champion, who passed away today. Fantastic guy, and there are no losers in the battle with cancer. So we miss you, Matt.
Yeah, I was going to mention something about that and at the end of the show, but I'm glad that that you brought that up, because I wanted to say something about it while you were on the air, because I know that you knew him personally. For me, he was one of my best friends from about 2008, 2009 to about 2012 when he had his kid and was going back to school for engineering. And he was a guy that he was the most reliable person I've ever met in my life, and one of the best husbands, and was one of the best dudes. Paul, I know that you've played Nevin Park in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's the main mule out there. He's the guy that him and Mark Huther pretty much put that course in together. And I mean, I know that you can say that you've played it before, and you know that that's an amazing course. And he was just a hard worker and a dude who picked my brain every day after I won Am Worlds in 2008. And you know, David Wiggins was going to win Am Worlds in 2009. Everyone knew it.
Yep.
But Matt Keats and I talked on the way to tournaments every day. We talked for hours. Never listened to music when Matt and I drove to tournaments. We talked the whole time. And he wanted to know everything that I had to say about disc golf. And he was a sponge. And come the end of the tournament in Kansas City, Matt Keats was the amateur world champion. And it blew everyone's mind because everyone knew David Wiggins was going to win. And he was the most consistent. He was the hardest worker. He was the best student to the game. And it was really, really amazing. And the only other thing I'll say about Matt, disc golf related, was that the only pro tournament he ever won was in Durham, North Carolina, and it was the first, and that's where he's from. His hometown's Durham. And it was the first tournament he played after his daughter was born. And earlier in the week, I was looking up stats. I don't normally do this, but I was looking up Matt Keats' stats specifically, and I was thinking to myself, man, Matt Keats has never had a win before. And I was like, I wonder if he'll ever get one. And I didn't think it was going to be that weekend because I was going to play that tournament. He wasn't going to beat me. You know, and Barry Schultz was there, and Brian Schweberger was there, and like that competition was pretty tough, and sure enough, Matt Keats came out, played the best golf of his life, and won the very only tournament he ever won as a pro. The first tournament he played after his daughter was born, and afterwards I asked him what happened, and he said that everything was put in perspective and allowed him to just do his thing, and really gonna miss the man. He's certainly one of my best friends that I've ever had. And
I remember right before he won Am Worlds, he played my tournament in Raleigh, and like you said, Germ, everybody was saying Wiggins was going to win. It was Wiggins is to lose, and both of those guys played my tournament. They both played open and denied cash. And I remember when Wiggins came up, I said something about oh, this guy's going to win Am Worlds next week, and Matt Keats was over on the side and said, we'll see about that. And turns out he was right, but wanted to definitely get that in. Great guy, yeah. And just a terrible loss for our community, and it's really hit a lot of people here in our area today.
Yeah, man.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Good night.
Thanks, Robert. Appreciate it once again.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Robert and Germ. And I didn't know him personally, but I did see him around, like you said, and. Terrible loss for the disc golf community, and my prayers go out to his family and friends, and I'm just very sorry to hear that.
Yeah, man. We North Carolina's I don't think that if you've been playing disc golf in North Carolina for more than 5 years, you knew Matt Keats really well. He is, like I said before, he's just I can't think of one negative thing to say about the guy. He was a smart, hardworking, incredibly fun. The only bad thing I can say about the guy was that he was a Duke fan. I mean, other than that, he went to UNC and he was a Duke fan. I will never, ever understand that for the life of me. And I've tried picking his brain on that one for years. But other than that, really good dude. But and he'll be missed. So much love.
Yeah, and sounds like a great guy, German. Sorry for your loss, buddy, and Robert, you as well, and all the North Carolina area. So, I don't have a whole lot more after that. I think we talked about a lot of great things with Robert, and hopefully, maybe some change can come out of this discussion. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about for this week? Or?
Well, yeah, not really for me personally. I just wanted to say thanks for we got some questions that we might not have time to get around to this week. We had a show run a little bit long with our guest, but keep those questions coming along, and we really appreciate all the support, and we'll definitely get to those questions next episode.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jerma, good luck in Australia also.
Yeah, man. Good night, mate.
Yeah, good luck with your travels, and travel safe, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Brady, thank you for everything and for the podcast this week. I thought the material was really good, and thank you again to Robert for coming on and explaining some of those hot issues with us. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week.